Hello, and welcome to another lecture. In today's lecture, we'll be talking about form, we'll be talking about mass and volume, and we'll be talking about texture. Form is important because it is the physical manifestation of an artwork. We'll talk about the difference between form and content, and then mass and volume are connected together because mass is the positive aspect of a form and volume is the empty aspect of a form. And then finally, we'll get into texture, which involves visual texture and physical texture. Visual texture is when texture is implied in two-dimensional art, and physical texture is when there is actual real texture. So we'll look at a lot of examples, including some ancient sites, the pyramids of Egypt, the Olmec giant heads, and also some contemporary works that involve mass, volume, form. So please enjoy the lecture. Thank you.
The elements of art: form, volume, mass, texture. Form. Okay, form refers to the three-dimensional quality of an object, or the illusion of three-dimensionality in a two-dimensional work. It encompasses the physical and visual attributes that give an artwork its volume, depth, and structure. So form is the physical manifestation of idea. It's the sculpture, it's the painting, any of the mediums. The content is the idea itself. So the subject, the emotional, intellectual, spiritual, symbolic implications. So the content could be a portrait of someone, whereas the form would be the paint and the canvas. The form may be a church. The content would be all of the stained glass windows that depict the scenes from the Bible. So a 2D is an imaginative world, where three-dimensional is the tangible world. The 2D, you have to imagine the form, you have to imagine what the volume of it would be, where 3D, it's actually there in front of you. Just a refresher on abstract. Remember, the word abstract is to simplify, emphasize, or distort the qualities of a perceptual reality, and it's the reduction of an image or object to its essential aspect of its form or concept. So the form, the concept would be a spider, and this is an abstracted form of a spider. Representation, the lifelike depiction of persons or objects. So this is by Stephanie Shih, and it is ceramic depictions of different kinds of consumable foods. The three-dimensional art possesses four of the visual elements: so form, volume, mass, and texture. Sculpture and architecture, and this has to have three-dimensional art has to have height, width, and depth. So there, right here, you got your height, width, and depth. One dimension is best expressed through a simple line, because this is because only one coordinate is needed to specify that point. So here, two dimensions are defined by having two coordinates that specify a point on it, such as a plane or sphere. So that would be here, two dimensions on a flat plane, whereas three dimensions are in the round, which means that you can walk around them, and it would represent form and depth to be viewable from all sides. And then there's a fourth dimension that would also represent time, so the time it takes to walk around a sculpture. Let's talk about the Great Pyramids of Giza. They were built in 2560 BCE, and they're in Egypt. The pyramids were considered ancient by the time that Cleopatra existed. She lives closer to our present time than she did to the time the pyramids were built. The ancient Romans actually saw the pyramids as a tourist destination because they were enamored with them as an ancient structure. The pyramid is an essential controlled geometric, and these pyramids are a monument to engineering. The greatest difference in side length is just over an inch, and they are level to less than 1 inch. The form is about order and control and reflects the canon of rules governing artists and architects in this period. The Great Pyramid served as tombs for pharaohs. Belief in the afterlife, a symbolic belief, the pyramid was encased in white limestone. Here's a picture of it back then and now. So it would have been encased in this white limestone. Now you can see just a very little bit of it is left on the top. And it was also had a golden top. So it rose majestically to the sky, the apex perhaps a transition into the afterlife and to the sun god Re. 5 million tons of stone, tens of thousands of workers, and more than 20 years to construct. Contrary to popular belief, it was not slaves that built the pyramids, but highly skilled craftsmen. There were remarkable feats of engineering that have puzzled modern architects for millennium, and we have different theories as to how they may have been built. So this is the Sphinx. It was made by the pharaoh Khafre. The Sphinx is a Greek word. It wasn't a Egyptian word, but it's the largest carving in the world from a single stone. What does this imposing portrait of the pharaoh Khafre say? What kind of person do you think he was? Well, the scale and form of this work convey a message of strength. It's 60 feet tall, carved right out of limestone bedrock. So the Sphinx is a combination of a man and a lion, and so the feet of it are lion's paws. This is the Great Serpent Mound in Ohio. It was made by prehistoric artists in the Americas in 800 BCE to 100 CE. How would you describe its form? Maybe organic, curvy lines, inspired by the forms of nature, the serpent. The identity of the people who created this Great Serpent Mound in Ohio is still debated. But we know the head of the serpent is aligned with the position of the setting sun on the summer solstice. So they probably had advanced knowledge of solar observations. And the snake is depicted eating an egg. Very mysterious piece. Who made it? Where did it come from? Amish Kapoor made the cloud gate. Some of you may have seen it if you've been to Chicago. It's mostly known as the Bean. How does this piece strike you? It's made in 2003. Perhaps it's massive and imposing, organic or geometric. I think you would call it organic. It's stainless steel polished. It has a reflective polish, and it doubles the skyline. So Chicagoans are very proud of their skyline, and you can see that this the skyline is doubled, or you can see it twice. It's very fun to walk up and see your reflection distorted in it, and you can be pulled to the center where kind of everything coalesces in the middle underneath. This is a picture of me about a decade ago visiting the Cloud Gate. So it's fun, and the surface invites you to interact with it. Also, the sunsets are great in front of it. Just a refresher, organic versus geometric. Remember, geometric is precise, mathematically based, squares, circles, triangles, whereas organic is more curvy. It's organic, nature-inspired, water, rock. It has sort of a more fluid. And then a note on relief versus in the round. A relief is a combination of 2D and 3D. So a relief is when you have a flat plane that has carvings coming out of it, and you cannot walk around it. You can only view it from the front side. Whereas in the round, you're meant to walk all the way around the sculpture, so you can see the entire thing. So in the round, a three-dimensional object which is self-supporting and is designed to be viewed from all sides, as in freestanding sculptures. So this one here by Robert Rauschenberg, you can walk all the way around it. Relief is relatively flat, and therefore it can combine the strengths of 2D and 3D. There's three kinds of relief that we were concerned with. High relief, that's where the carvings actually come off of it. You can see the foot coming off here, the hammer. This is a shipbuilding relief in Lionsgate at London. This mid relief, where it just comes off a little bit. This is a Persian relief, and this is from the temples of Borobudur in Indonesia. Just a slight bit coming off, and then low relief, where it's almost flat or it's even indented into the surface. So this is an ancient Egyptian. This is Angkor Wat. I visited Angkor Wat at one time. They have many reliefs, Buddhist and Hindu reliefs carved. You can see how big the wall is here in the temple. There's a picture of me with the big head. There's over 200 heads carved into this temple. Here is a relief, an abstract relief. So reliefs, a lot of times reliefs associate with historical or government propaganda or narrative. And this one is actually just an abstract relief. In sculpture, there's two kinds that you can participate in. One is subtractive form. That's where you remove material from an initial mass to reveal the form. Or there's additive, and that's when material is added together to enhance the form. So this one here would be subtractive. You're starting with an initial piece of stone and removing to reveal the shape, the sculpture on the inside. And this one would be additive, where you take a piece of clay and you add it together to make a face. So pieces being added together. Also, painting can sometimes become relief. This is a painting by the artist Thornton Dial, African-American artist from the South. And a lot of these are made from collaging different items onto a canvas and then painting them. All right, volume versus mass. Volume is the amount of space an object occupies. So this would be a volume. The amount of space that this cube is occupying, the whole, you can calculate the volume of this cube. The mass is the weight or density of an object. So mass is a solid. It's the density, how thick the object is, how much weight there is to it. So volume, another way to think of it, volume is the empty aspect of a 3D form, whereas mass is the solid aspect of a 3D form. Volume is the amount of space an object occupies, enclosed area of a 3D space. So cubes, cylinders, cones, and spheres are common volumes that you can calculate. Kendall Buster did this new growth volumetric sculpture. It's a different futuristic city made from different volumes. This is a piece by Richard Serra, the minimalist sculptor, a famed sculptor from the 20th and 21st centuries. He actually just passed away last semester. Richard Serra is known for his large, massive sculptures usually made out of steel or lead. This one is called One Ton Prop, or House of Cards, made in 1969, 1968. So we have a tension that is from the actual walls of the piece and how they're sitting together and tracing out a volume on the inside. It encloses a space. The slabs, they lean against each other, and maybe it looks dangerous in a way, almost dangerous looking, like a house of cards, and it could fall at any moment. And actually, the number 3 version of this sculpture collapsed in 1971 and actually killed a museum worker who was trapped underneath. This is a site-specific sculpture in that it always has to be reassembled on the site that it was created. This is another one of Richard Serra's sculptures. So the installation process is very elaborate with these type of sculptures. And Fred Stanback, he traces out volumes with yarn. So his pieces are mostly just volumetric, geometric shapes that are traced out. What is the largest volume you've ever been in or encountered? So think about that a moment. This is actually a phone made out of wire, and that's a project that is done in 3D fundamentals. Take an object and just make the volume of the object, either a shoe or some kind of everyday object. All right, mass. Mass is a solid 3D form. It can be as dense as a bar of gold or as light as a porous sponge, often carved from a solid block, plaster, clay, stone, etc. So something that has mass talks about stability, power, and strength. Of course, the pyramid has a lot of mass, tons of mass. It's heavy, it's dense. There's layers of stone. And it's also the perception of mass. That's one of the interesting parts about mass, is this idea that when you see it, you don't even have to feel the weight of it, but you can feel your imagination can feel the density and the weight of the object. These are also objects with mass. This is an Olmec head. The Olmecs, the earliest known Mesoamerican civilization in what is now Mexico. They're solid, thick mass intended to impress and intimidate with their presence. Then this one over here is Tom Friedman. So this is a bunch of pencils that are cut at 45-degree angles and glued together to create a big ball. So it has mass too, but a more porous mass, whereas this one is a denser mass. This one has mass, but a more porous mass. All right, so here's another one of the colossal heads. There's quite a few of these colossal heads that the Olmec civilization created have been discovered. Some of them are 5 foot tall. Some of them are up to 12 foot tall. They range from 6 to 25 tons in weight. The eye of each is about the size of a human head. We think that they would depict an Olmec ruler, but the mass of it would say weight, power, might. They may have been placed outside of an altar for intimidation. The local or the regular people would be intimidated and almost have eyes on them from their ruler. This piece by Rachel Whiteread is called House 1993. Have you noticed something strange about this piece? It's actually the volume of a piece, or the empty aspect of a piece. So this house was destroyed, but before it was destroyed, concrete was poured into it. And so just the empty aspect of the house is now there, and the positive aspect is gone. So it basically creates a ghost image of the house, of its interior only. So the volume becomes a mass. Similar with this piece by Rachel Whiteread is called Book Corridors. And you can see this is where the books were on the shelf. The books are now gone, and the visible becomes visible here. It makes us think, wait, where did the books go? The memories, the moments of the past, maybe some nostalgia or sadness for loss. What does this evoke? These missing books, just the shapes of where the books would have been. Plays with positive and negative space. Another shape or another piece that plays with space is Levitated Mass by Michael Heinzer. This is a boulder outside of LACMA, which is a museum in LA. And you walk underneath it. It's a massive boulder. When you step underneath it, there's sort of an intimidation of the space. You feel this mass bearing down on you. So they brought this boulder from out in the desert and they placed it right here where you can interact with it. All right, for our final shape of this, or for our final element of this lecture, let's talk about texture. Texture is the surface quality. So it could be on a 3D, it can be found, it can be touched, or it can be implied. This is the 3D or the surface quality of a painting by Philip Guston. So you can see all the brush strokes. There's actual texture to the canvas itself. So texture is a visual or tactile quality of a form. In 3D, textural elaboration can vary considerably. So it can be, slight grooves carved into a ceramic piece, or crazy wiry spikes all over a suit. So this is actual texture, right? This is real texture that you can touch. The other kind of texture in art would be illusionistic texture or implied texture. In Zurabaran, this is a lamb, the Lamb of Christ. So in the tradition of Christian doctrine, they say the sacrificial lamb, meaning the lamb would be the one that held the sins and be destroyed. And Jesus is often called the Lamb of God. This lamb, he spends a lot of time creating a nice fluffy texture on it to emphasize its innocence, make it feel cute, fluffy, soft. Therefore, when we know what it's for to be sacrificed, it's much harder to want to do it. So the texture plays a conceptual role in this. And this right here, if you may know, is a halo. So the lamb is divine. Again, here, surface of a 2D space or 3D volume is texture. So this one engages our senses. It's a collage. It's called psychedelic delicatessen. All kinds of things glued together, collaged together to create this feeling of a lot of texture, even though it's just flat. It engages our senses, engages that tactile part of us. So here are the two kinds again: physical texture, the actual texture of a canvas; thickly applied paint, rough texture of wood grain; visual texture, the illusion of texture, mark making, which simulates texture. Mark Bradford is a painter based out of LA. He collages together all kinds of different found objects to create these massive, massive paintings. Texture plays a big role in his work, looking at the detritus of life sort of smashed together. So combining the physical and the visual can unify a composition. So in this one, not only you feel the texture of the cloth, the skin, but you also, if you look closely, you'll notice that it has very beautiful brush strokes. So there's a physical texture of the brush strokes as well. Same thing with this one. This is by Ansel Kiefer. You look closely, very beautiful texture, whereas at the same time has the illusion of sunflowers and a man laying on the ground. Lucian Freud, a figurative painter from the 20th century, he paints very, very thickly textured portraits that become sculptural at some level. Frank Auerbach, another painter who heavily uses texture. This is actually a portrait as well. There's an eye, there's an eye and mouth. I'm not kidding. It's really a portrait. These would be more examples of implied texture. So these are how you can make textures on a flat surface. This is by Gustave Doré, has an incredible implied visual texture used through mark making. This is by Claudio Bravo, is what you call a trompe l'oeil, and it is a illusion, a painting, but an illusion that you're looking at the real back of a painting or package. Finally, let's talk about Meret Oppenheim object in 1936. So this is a fur-covered cup, saucer, and spoon. Oppenheim is a surrealist, so there's, again, tapping into the subconscious with dreamlike imagery, and it has a subversive statement here. It contradicts associations with what we have of a teacup. We wouldn't think of a teacup as in fur, but the fur is kind of an object of fetish. So there's a lot of fur with fashion design, fur coats. It's a luxury item. Hunters would go to Africa and shoot these different exotic animals, bring back the fur. So and then take this consumer fetishized item of a fur and then bring it into the everyday as a teacup. And some believe it's making some kind of a comment on consumerism perhaps, but it's not rational. There's a tactile experience of looking at it. It's also very weird and dreamlike. And then Klaus Oldenburg, this is called Ghost Drum Set. So Klaus Oldenburg, this drum set, of course, is soft and flimsy, challenges our traditional notions of what a drum set would be. A drum set is powerful, it's booming, it's upright. This one is flaccid, it's deflated, it's pathetic. So we see the texture of this one, taking our expectations and turning them on their head. So if you take texture and you play with it in a way that we're not used to, you can make a point about an object or a piece of everyday life that is outside of the norm. All right, thank you for watching this lecture today. And
don't forget to do your quiz and your reading and your sketchbook. Everything due on Sunday. Thank you.